Hello, happy Thursday. Thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. For a few years now, one of the things that you can count on seeing in Super Bowl ads is this. It is a weird, only in America television ad phenomenon in which very thin women eat very fatty food, usually in slow motion. This is a thing we do in our America. We have been doing this for years. I'm not trying to explain it. It just is. But this year, the latest iteration of the thin woman eating fattening food on TV, the latest version of this ad for this year's Super Bowl, it has sparked at least one call for a boycott of the fast food chain that has made this year's lady in a bikini eating a hamburger ad.
Once again, they're putting on a sleazy, smutty ad during the middle of the NFL Super Bowl this Sunday evening. So when you sit down with your family, your wife, your daughters, your children to watch this, you may be exposed to pornography. I mean, just straight up pornography on network television.
I don't think that this year's lady eating a hamburger ad at the Super Bowl is going to lead to a widespread boycott of the fast food chain that is running that ad. You never know. I don't think it's going to be But today, that boycott effort, nevertheless, was announced on an American Family Association radio show by an American Family Association staff member. The American Family Association has been in the news this week because they are taking the chairman of the National Republican Party and apparently dozens of other members of the Republican National Committee on an all-expenses-paid trip to Israel. They're all due to leave on Saturday. They'll be gone for 9 days. Now, members of the RNC aren't exactly a free school lunch kind of bunch, right? They tend to be pretty well-off people. If they want to go to Israel, there's nothing stopping them from paying for themselves to go to Israel, whether they want to go individually or as a big Republican National Committee group. Who cares? What people care about, and I think what has become an interesting news story this week, is that the RNC instead decided this week not to go on their own dime, but to go as guests of the American Family Association, which hosts these radio shows.
Hitler discovered that he could not get straight soldiers to be savage and brutal and vicious enough to carry out his orders, but that homosexual soldiers basically had no limits in the savagery and brutality they were willing to inflict on whoever Hitler sent them after. So he surrounded himself, virtually all of the stormtroopers, the brown shirts, were male homosexuals.
Last night, we reported that American Family Association staffer, Brian Fisher, was fired from his job yesterday as a national spokesman for the American Family Association and as the group's director of issue analysis. The president of American Family Association told us yesterday that Brian Fisher had been fired from the group in that capacity, but that he would continue with his radio show. As the president of the group put it to us yesterday, as of yesterday, Brian Fisher is, quote, just a talk show host. But he is still their talk show host. The American Family Association confirmed to us today that even though yesterday they fired Brian Fisher from his other jobs with their organization, they are still paying him to make his Brian Fisher magic on the radio.
Counterfeit religions, alternative religions to Christianity, have no First Amendment right to the free exercise of religion.
Yesterday, the Israeli media started raising the alarm that the National Republican Party from the United States was sending its national committee members and its chairman on a trip funded by and led by this group, which, among other things, has promoted the idea on its radio shows that Jewish people have no First Amendment right in this country to practice Judaism. Why would the National Republican Party partner with an organization like that? I mean, how is the National Republican Party, how is Reince Priebus going to explain why the National Republican Party is partnering with this group, taking a trip with this group that has argued on its radio shows that if, for example, you are a Jewish immigrant who wants to immigrate to the United States, the condition of your being allowed to emigrate to this country is that you must convert to Christianity?
Number one, those who came to our shores would be expected to adopt our religious values and our traditions That would mean Christianity, the religion of their homeland and the God of their homeland. They would leave them behind.
So, hey, Jewish immigrants or potential immigrants of the world, you can emigrate to the United States. You just have to stop being a Jew. You have to become a Christian if you want to be allowed into this country. That is who the Republican Party is taking this trip with, leaving on Saturday. Now, I don't know if the Republican Party and Reince Priebus just didn't think people would notice that this is who they're doing this trip with. But people have noticed, and the resulting publicity and uproar over the Republican Party doing this, I think, is now putting a little heat on them, on this partnership. The American Family Association sent this letter yesterday to the activist group, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and it gave the Southern Poverty Law Center a bullet-pointed list of the various positions taken by Brian Fisher that his employer no longer wants to be associated with. They sent this letter renouncing a whole long list of specific things that Brian Fisher has said on American Family Association radio, most of which are things he said years ago, and they were apparently fine with until now. But now that they're doing this event with Reince Priebus and the National Republican Party, they are renouncing this specific list of things that Brian Fisher has said. And Brian Fisher has, as we reported last night, been fired from one of his jobs with the organization and his role as their national spokesman. They don't want him described as a spokesperson anymore, but they are still keeping him on the payroll and keeping him on the radio. Now, after days of refusing to comment on this controversy, not just to us, but to everybody, after days of refusing to give any comment about why the National Republican Party would be partnering with a group like this, tonight, finally, the RNC has given us a comment on the matter. This was their full statement to us, quote, "We don't agree with Brian Fisher's comments and are glad the American Family Association has severed ties with him." Here's the problem. American Family Association has not severed ties with him. They just fired him from one of his jobs at that group, and they kept him in his other one. So that's one as yet unresolved problem for Chairman Reince Priebus and the National Republican Party. I mean, if they wanted to be associated with the American Family Association, which sounds nice, but not associated with that kook, Brian Fisher, they have not achieved separation from Brian Fisher. That has not happened. They're still in bed with the, Hitler, homosexual, Jews have to convert hamburger boycott guy. That's still a problem. That's one problem. The other problem, which the Republican Party has not addressed at all, is specifically who is taking Reince Priebus and all the other committee members on this trip, who is personally leading this trip and organizing it and going with them, taking all the top Republicans in the RNC away on a jet plane the day after tomorrow. His name is David Lane. He works for a part of the American Family Association that's called the American Renewal Project. He's not a very high-profile guy in mainstream circles, but if you follow this kind of stuff, you might recognize some of the events that he's been associated with. He was the organizer of the Bobby Jindal prayer rally, sort of presidential campaign kickoff prayer rally that happened this past weekend in Louisiana, and that attracted protesters from all over the state. David Lane also organized the Rick Perry presidential campaign prayer rally kickoff event during the 2012 campaign. And here's why it's very hard to believe that the Republican Party can really go ahead with this trip on Saturday with David Lane. Here's why. During the 2012 presidential campaign, when it became clear that Mitt Romney was probably going to be the nominee from the Republican Party, luckily this didn't go on for too long and it was not too widespread, but there was one burst of really ugly bigotry that was slung at Mitt Romney when it became clear that he was probably going to be the nominee. And that bigotry that was slung at him was about his religion. At an event in October 2011 that was hosted in part by the American Family Association, Rick Perry, who was fresh off his stadium prayer rally in Texas, organized by the American Family Association and David Lane, Rick Perry was introduced at that event by this Texas pastor. And that ended up, you have a picture of this guy? Yeah, there he is. That ended up being a real dark moment, a real low moment, not just in this presidential campaign, but I would say in the history of presidential campaigning. This introduction at this event and this association of this guy with Rick Perry's campaign, it ended up being something that got national attention and that really rattled the presidential campaign at the time, really rattled the Republican Party. Because in that introduction, the pastor introducing Rick Perry at that event, he raised eyebrows when he pointedly, in his introduction, called Rick Perry a genuine follower of Christ. Emphasis on genuine. And because that raised some questions about what he was implying about other people's religious beliefs, reporters followed up with the pro-Rick Pastor Perry guy right after the introduction, right outside the event, and he made it crystal clear to reporters. Yes, what it sounded like he was implying is really what he was implying. What he meant to say and what he meant by that introduction, he explained, was that Rick Perry is a real Christian and Mitt Romney is something else. He called Mitt Romney a member of a cult. Quote, Mormonism is a cult. Every true born-again follower of Christ ought to embrace a Christian over a non-Christian. He told reporters that Mitt Romney is, quote, not a Christian. The reason this was such an ugly moment in the campaign is not, because of the theological nature of this dispute, right? I mean, your religious beliefs are your religious beliefs, including your religious beliefs about other religions. The reason this was so ugly is because this part of the religious right wasn't just making a theological argument about what they believed about their own religion vis-a-vis Mitt Romney's. They were making an overt argument that Mitt Romney should not be elected to public office in this country specifically because of his religion.
The value of electing a Christian goes beyond the public policies that he or she may enact. We make a grave mistake in underestimating the value of having a Christian in office. Followers of Mormonism, Hinduism, Islam, they are not worshiping the same God in a different way. We believe that they are following after false gods.
This is not a Christian faith. It is, as Robert Jeffress of First Baptist Church Dallas says, it is a false religion. What this would mean for the spiritual health of the United States of America if a worshiper of a false god occupied the White House.
It was an ugly strand of religious bigotry directed at Mitt Romney for his religion by certain parts of the religious right, including the American Family Association, when Mitt Romney ran for president in 2012. At the height of that ugliness, the Daily Beast obtained emails that were written by this guy, by David Lane, the guy who had led the Rick Perry prayer rally for that campaign, the same guy who was about to lead Reince Priebus and the top leadership of the National Republican Party on this trip this weekend. In these emails, David Lane said that pro-Rick Perry pastor, the one who called Mormonism a cult and said no Christian should vote for a Mormon guy like Mitt Romney, David Lane said about that pastor, quote, we owe Dr. Jeffress a big thank you. Getting out Dr. Jeffress's message, juxtaposing traditional Christianity to the false god of Mormonism, is very important. He then said, quote, let me go on the record. I won't vote for Mitt Romney as the Republican nominee in 2012. In context, what he meant was specifically because of Mitt Romney's religion. Why is the National Republican Party sending its chairman and all its national leadership on a trip led by that guy who said he wanted to be on the record about the fact that he wouldn't vote for Mitt Romney on religious grounds because of Mitt Romney's religion? I mean, it's not like the religious bigot line against Mitt Romney was a mainstream thing in the 2012 campaign. Yeah, it was around, but this was basically a short, shrill, ugly little thing that Rick Perry, I think, did real harm to himself by flirting with and getting even close to during that campaign. It was a really fringe, dirty, ugly element of that campaign. It was not a widespread thing. But the Republican Party is now explicitly embracing these guys. And not just people who are related to people who are related to people who are related to these guys. I mean, the I won't vote for Mitt Romney because of his religion guy is the same guy, the exact person who is taking Reince Priebus and the Republican Party leadership on this trip the day after tomorrow. Now this, again, tonight, just tonight, is the sum total of the Republican Party's public comments on this matter to date. After they sent us this generous comment tonight, we wrote back to them to tell them, actually, the factual basis of their comment is wrong. The American Family Association has not severed ties with this Brian Fisher guy, this guy who says that Jews don't have the right to practice their religion in America and everybody should be forced to convert to Christianity if they want to immigrate to this country. And we have to grapple with the problem of somebody who worships a false god like Mitt Romney getting into the White House because Mormonism is a false religion. We wrote back to the Republican Party tonight to ask if they understood that Brian Fisher actually still works for this group that they are going on a trip with. this group that they are partnering with to go on this big event. We have not heard back from the Republican Party about that. We're not sure they quite understand. We also asked the Republican Party today if it was true that they pressured the American Family Association to do this renunciation of some of the statements of Brian Fisher, if they pressured the American Family Association to fire him from his spokesman job at the group. We didn't hear back from the Republican Party about that either. We also, I should tell you, asked them sort of in italics with some implied exclamation points, just if they really are still planning on going ahead with this trip, taking Reince Priebus and dozens of members of the Republican National Committee, the national leadership of the Republican Party, on a trip with the Brian Fisher group. And the guy who said he wouldn't vote for Mitt Romney because Mitt Romney's a Mormon, and no Christian should, right? They haven't answered us about that. I have to say it's kind of hard to believe that they will go ahead with this trip. It is hard to know what it will do to the Republican Party for them to get on board in this explicit way with these folks, for a trip to Israel, no less. And this is the quote from David Lane to Haaretz this week. "We were established as a Christian nation in the name of God and for the advancement of the Christian faith." What will it mean to the Republican Party going forward if they go on a trip to Israel with a group that advocates that America is by Christians and for Christians only, Christians exclusively? Joining us now is Rabbi Jonah Pesner. He's the director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. Rabbi Pesner, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate your time tonight.
My pleasure, Rachel. Thanks so much for having me.
So I first just want to ask your top-line thoughts about the RNC taking this trip with the American Family Association.
Well, let me just quote the graphic you used earlier. Oy. It's a real concern, Rachel. Obviously, it's a great thing that the RNC is going to Israel, but the important thing here is the AFA, the American Family Association, is considered by many a hate group, and the views that it espouses, as you've reported on this show, are anti-gay, they're anti-Muslim, they're anti-Jewish, and so frankly, Rachel, they're anti-American, and the RNC does not want to be associated with any organization that espouses hate, and should certainly delegitimize that organization and shouldn't take funding from it.
I don't know very much about the Republican Party's sort of internal politics and the sort of relationships that they have with other groups, particularly the other groups' representation in Washington and stuff. Through the RAC, through your work with Reform Judaism and your work as a leader in the Jewish community and your connections to Jewish American politics, could you describe whether or not the RNC essentially has a pretty good relationship with the Jewish community? I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, there are right-thinking Republicans in the Jewish community. There are right-thinking Democrats in the Jewish community. And first of all, religion is not a partisan issue. And our love for the state of Israel and the strong Israel-American relationship is not a partisan issue. One of the great things about this country is that we celebrate religious freedom and religious pluralism, and the Jewish community is active in both political parties. That's why I think all of us are scratching our heads, and I think all of us, frankly, are outraged. And this really isn't a Jewish issue. It's an American issue. No political party should be associating themselves with any hate group. That's just not American.
Do you think that there would be a negative response in Israel if it became widely known who the Republican Party was taking this trip with? Obviously, as you say, come to Israel, that's a good thing, and that's at the surface. But the fact that the Republicans are taking the trip with this group, do you think that would be negatively received in Israel?
Yeah, I think any democratic society that values religious freedom and tolerance, and Israel is a society that places social justice and diversity as core values, and democracy as a core value, just like we do here in America. And so I think that Israelis, when they, again, it's nonpartisan, I think they would be upset by either political party if they associated themselves with any group that was both anti-Muslim and anti-Jewish and anti-gay, and frankly, such a hateful group.
Rabbi Jonah Pesner, director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. Rabbi Pesner, thanks very much for talking with us about it. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
A couple of years ago, former President George W. Bush gave a speech to a group that appeared to be a pro-Israel group on the surface. And when you looked at what their actual mission was, it was to convert Jews to Christianity in order to bring about the rapture, in order to bring about the apocalypse. And George W. Bush received a lot of criticism from Jewish groups in this country for talking to a group that radical. I continue to believe that George W. Bush didn't really know who he was talking to when he went ahead and gave that speech. I sort of live in hope right now that the Republican National Committee didn't really know who they were getting in bed with here either. But there's still time for them to bail out on this thing. Plane leaves Saturday morning. They don't have to be on it. We'll be right back.